To the dramatic scene in the Oval Office today, the tense confrontation, President Trump ambushing the president of South Africa.
Up next, another Oval Office meltdown, President Trump ambushing the president of South Africa.
President Trump is being accused of conducting something of a diplomatic ambush of South Africa's president in the Oval Office.
To be with you, I'm Katie Tur. President Trump orchestrated another Oval Office ambush today.
Today, Donald Trump meeting with the president of South Africa and attempting to ambush and humiliate that leader.
Zelensky territory, where essentially he was a bit ambushed inside the Oval Office.
Felt like an ambush in there, kind of like the President Zelensky meeting in the Oval Office.
This was an ambush. It was orchestrated.
Cyril Ramaphosa brought his best diplomatic self to this meeting, but nothing could have prepared him for this multimedia ambush.
What started as, to some degree, an ambush.
Well, Katie, I mean, it was an ambush.
Ambush.
Ambushed.
Ambush.
An ambush.
Ambushing.
Ambush and ambush.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to react to the mainstream liberal media getting their talking points from the Democrat Party as to how they should respond to President Trump's meeting with the president of South Africa yesterday in the Oval Office. That was the most entertaining meeting in the Oval Office with another foreign leader since Zelensky, right? Since President Trump set Zelensky straight, and President Trump decided to set this South African president straight when it comes to the violence against white farmers that is happening in South Africa. And now the mainstream liberal media, they are losing their minds, okay? They're claiming that President Trump ambushed, right? That is the new talking point, right? That's the new word they're using in order to describe what happened here, right? They're saying that President Trump ambushed the South African president. Take a look.
I was just in the White House in an Oval Office meeting between President Donald Trump and Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa. The meeting started off, pretty cordial. They were joking, laughing, talking about golf. But then it turned very tense very quickly when President Trump, he had a video queued up.
Turn the lights down and just put this on. It's right behind you.
And literally, I looked over my right shoulder, and there was some White House aide. She had a laptop. She opens up the laptop. You see it happen really quickly. Everyone starts looking my way because I'm standing next to the TV. And then they dim the light, and then they play this video. And everybody had their eyes wide open, like, what is going on? A couple months ago, Ramaphosa signed a measure into law that allowed the government to take land without providing compensation to the owners. President Trump went ahead to make a statement basically saying that the South African government is confiscating land and they're doing terrible things. This really picked up on a theme that Trump had started in his first term when he also tweeted out that white farmers were having their land seized and that there were mass killings of white people, both of which are untrue. Cyril Ramaphosa, he had been wanting to sit down with Trump to try and clear the air and refocus the relationship because he really wanted to focus on trade. He wanted to focus on economic partnerships. They had prepared for it to go bad, but they couldn't have imagined that this would have happened. The South African delegation was very uncomfortable, right? They were squirming. You had Ramaphosa who had sort of seemed like he wanted to roll his eyes. When the video was over, Trump took out a stack of news articles and was going through them and saying, these are all people who were killed, and I was able to see some of them, and some of them had nothing to do with killings of white farmers. But it was just a real show. On the South African side, they had Johan Rupert, who's a billionaire, South African, he's white Afrikaner. And he knows both Trump and Ramaphosa, and he played an instrumental role in brokering this meeting. And he basically spoke up and said,
"We have too many deaths, but it's across the board. It's not only white farmers.
Both black and white people are getting killed." For President Ramaphosa, it was a sign that, hey, listen, if there is genocide going on, we would not have this Afrikaner, this very powerful man in the room advocating for South Africa. The meeting essentially turned into an ambush of the South African president. It was very tense and yeah, it really broke down very quickly. What we saw was the pre-meeting meeting, right? So that was before their official meeting, and they went into a working lunch after this meeting. So I think whether they actually get to substantive issues and whether that is able to sort of patch up the relationship, a lot of it is going to depend on whether the South African delegation can successfully get Trump to not focus on the Afrikaner issue anymore.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, okay? What you have here is left-wing liberal media outlets. Now, all of a sudden, they are making an argument that, well, President Trump should not worry about the alleged violence against minorities in South Africa, right? Don't worry about that. Sweep that aside, right? It's not a big deal, okay? Just focus on all the other things, okay? Don't focus on how they're treating the white farmers, right? This is what they're saying. Now, again, they would never say this if the roles were reversed, right? If this was another country, that was mostly white, and you had a black minority, and you had accusations of violence against black minorities, they would never say that, yeah, we should just sweep this aside, right? And just don't worry about it. Just move on to another issue, okay? Just focus on other stuff. Again, it's just amazing how that works, right? These people are really showing you. They're showing you straight up, like I've been telling you guys, that these people claiming that they're fighting for so-called equal rights, they're not fighting for equal rights. They're fighting for special rights and special privileges, right? And they see South Africa and what has happened in that country as a roadmap for what they want to do with America. And this is why they're so freaked out about President Trump taking on this issue. So with that being said, I want to react to this CNN panel ambushing Scott Jennings over his defense of President Trump because, again, a lot of these people in the media, they're extremely triggered by what happened in the White House. And it's really hilarious to watch these people melt down over this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
But the farmers are not black.
Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is Elise Labott. She is the Edward R. Murrow Press Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and host of Cosmopolitics on Substack. And you can see there why President Ramaphosa was a negotiator for the anti-apartheid government because he had extraordinary patience in trying to explain to Trump that what he is claiming there in the Oval Office for the world to see is just not true.
That's right. And he also, brought some props with him. He brought some South African golfers, a coffee table book. He knows that, he needs to kind of, in this feudal system, bring gifts to President Trump. It wasn't enough to stop that ambush, but he tried to, correct the facts, let him know that the majority, and there is a lot of crime in South Africa, the majority is not against whites, it's against blacks. The majority is not against farmers, as you said in the intro. President Trump didn't want to hear any of it. It wasn't till one of the golfers and one of the white billionaires that he brought with him kind of said, look, President Trump, this is what's going on. And I think that's when, then there was a joke about the jet, which we'll talk about later. But that's when I think the meeting kind of turned and the tensions were lowered a little bit.
This is straight out of the conspiracy land of the far right. And it is not based in fact. And it's amazing that this has actually become the foreign policy of the United States based on just straight up, we have the numbers. It is completely unsubstantiated. Scott.
You're saying it's not true that some white farmers have been murdered?
No, it's not true that there is a genocide against white farmers.
Okay, whatever you call it, have white farmers been murdered?
Actually, how many
have violence been committed against white farmers?
How many white farmers, hold on a second, how many white farmers have been murdered in
I don't
South
know,
Africa?
several. They asked.
No, how many?
I don't know, several.
I know why you don't know, because those numbers don't exist broken down by race.
I know this. I wouldn't trust the South African government to tell me. I know that.
How many black farmers?
So if the numbers are not out there broken down by race, then how do you know, Abby? How do you know that there's not mass killings of white farmers if the numbers aren't broken down by race, right? If the numbers aren't broken down by race, then shouldn't that make you question the reliability of the numbers, right? Shouldn't that make you ask questions about, is there any specific reason why they're not breaking it down by race, right? Maybe they're trying to hide something, right? Maybe they're not trying to tell the whole story about what's going on, okay? And maybe, just maybe, these claims are not just all made up, right? Maybe there's some truth to some of the claims out there about what's going on in South Africa. But, hey, I don't live in South Africa. I would love to visit South Africa, but it's an extremely dangerous country. Regardless, I think people should be upset about the fact that, again, such a beautiful country with so many resources as well, too, is so dangerous, right? Yeah, all of these killings happening. And according to these folks, it's mostly black folks being killed. But for whatever reason, they don't really seem to be concerned about that, right? Why is there no concern about all the violence that's happening in South Africa in general, right? Regardless of race, I do think the violence in South Africa is something that, if these people cared about black lives as much as they claim that they do, right, it would be something that, you would think they'd be concerned about, but they're not, okay? They're only concerned when the killings of whites are brought up, right? But, when it comes to anything else, then, they just want to sweep that under the rug because it doesn't really fit the narrative of the fact that you have a country that, has went through their racial reckoning, right, so to speak. And you have, these black folks running the country, and yet look at all the violence and the chaos that's happening as a result, which, again, according to these people, mostly black folks are losing their lives Again, you would think that these so-called crusaders for Black lives would be concerned about that. So again, I just find this to be fascinating.
Farmers have been murdered in South Africa.
Look, you guys are so triggered over 59 people.
No, I'm not.
After we left 20 million people in the country, I don't know why you're so triggered.
Haven't even brought up the people, the white people that Trump picked out because they were white and told them they could come to the country.
How much racial killing are you going to condone?
There are 19,000 murders in South Africa. 36 were on farms. 7 of the farmers were victims. Okay, this is according to the South African police.
And you think the South African government is a credible source?
The other 29, hold on a second, the 29 victims who were included in the farm killings were farm employees who tend to be black. So the vast majority of people killed on farms in South Africa are black. Where is the concern about them?
The concern is that there are white farmers who have had violence committed against them, and they're being threatened. They're being threatened every single day. There's 59 people,
hold on a second.
And you're triggered about 59 people,
and
I don't know why.
I haven't mentioned anything about 59 people.
They're triggered because they don't like the idea of white people coming to the country fleeing racial violence, right? That is what they're triggered by. But they're totally fine with any other so-called minority coming into the United States of America. Doesn't matter why they're fleeing, right? They can flee for economic opportunity, which is why a vast majority of them are fleeing, right? They're not fleeing because they're escaping political violence or persecution or anything like that. They just want to live in America, and these people are totally fine with it, right? But again, when it comes to these white folks coming in, now all of a sudden they're losing their minds. Again, fascinating stuff.
To substantiate white farmers
why are you only concerned about white people?
I'm only concerned about this story because these 59 people asked for status, they're getting status, and now everybody's freaking out about it.
They didn't ask for anything.
There is no evidence that white people have been targeted. Some white people in the larger issue of farmers, in the larger issue of violence, have been part of this violence, but there is no...
Why are they trying to get out? Why are they, if there's no...
Scott,
why are they trying to leave?
The majority of...
Have you seen the videos of the people saying, kill the white farmers?
The Afrikaners do not want to
What do you
leave.
think the phrase, kill the white farmers means?
Yeah, that's a phrase that the ANC, that was a phrase that, was against the anti-apartheid movement. But the ANC, who's ruling the government, the president's government, has disavowed that phrase, has disavowed it in songs, and there's no evidence that white people are being targeted. And the majority of Afrikaners do not want to leave.
They're not a part of the government, Scott. Right. You're taking a fringe movement and you're trying to make it a characteristic of an entire nation.
Again, it's hilarious because this is what they do all the time when it comes to the right. Okay, they do this all the time. You know how they broadcast groups like the Patriot Front and the Proud Boys or whatever, right? And then they take these fringe people and they say, oh, well, this is the right. Okay, this is an encapsulation of what the right believes in. So again, they do that all the time here in America. Now when it's being done, when that is being flipped on them, okay, now all of a sudden they want to say, well, you can't do that.
It's the height of racism to say that white people have to be exempted from all violence in any society. And that is what is being said here. If we cannot say, there is no white genocide happening, there is no farm genocide happening, and the argument is some white people have been killed, even though 27,000 murders happened in that country. What are we saying? If anybody of one racial group is murdered, then that constitutes a refugee status for that particular group.
When the president has also ended the refugee program for all other people in actual war. There is actual war.
I don't understand. You want them to stay, and I guess you want them to have violence committed against them. Would that make you happy?
Go ahead and comment, and then I'll let Sherman.
Violence against all people is wrong.
I agree with you.
Including the white farmers, but also including the black people that live in Africa. There are 1.5 billion people that live in the continent of Africa. There are 1.5 billion people that live in Africa.
Okay.
There are 63 million people that live in South Africa. Mm-hmm. There were 59 people that were extracted out of a continent of 1.5 billion people and brought to our country. And what color were those people? White.
So?
And where were there other places where genocide is happening in the continent where 1.5 billion? I'm not.
Yeah, and how many of those people have we let in? I guarantee you we've let more than 59 of those people from those countries into the United States of America. I guarantee you, right? We've let more of them in than the white South African farmers. In fact, we don't even have to guess, right? This is just facts. From 2011 to 2023, the U.S. admitted 624,589 refugees total. So almost 625,000 refugees have come into the country. Approximately 13%, 81,000 of them have been from African countries, okay? And in 2023, you had 60,000 refugees that were admitted. 43%, 25,000 or so were from Africa, primarily from the Democratic Republic of Congo, 18,000, 1,630 from Sudan, and from other countries. So again, we've let thousands of the blacks, right, from Africa into the country. Now, did any of these people have any issues with that? No, they had no issues with it. We let thousands of people, tens of thousands. They had no issues with it, zero, none. Now, all of a sudden, you let 59 white South Africans into the United States, and these people are losing their minds. But we've let, again, thousands of black refugees into the country. So they're trying to pretend as if there is some type of unfairness when it comes to our refugee admissions, but it's not. And these are the same people that turn around and tell you, well, that's a human right. It's a human right to seek asylum and to flee violence from your country and to come to the United States of America. That's the argument they use to justify mass illegal immigration, right? But apparently that argument doesn't apply to whites. Whites apparently do not have the right to seek asylum, right? Or to come into the United States as refugees. That seems to be what these people are arguing. Believe them when they tell you. They're telling you out loud how racist they are, right? They're telling you, believe them. I'm telling you that this is what they're saying because this is what they believe.
I'm not against it. I'm not against it. I want to know. No. I want you to have a complete. I want you to have. I can have a complete thought. I want you to have a complete thought.
My thought
you are okay.
These people are under threat, and
well,
now they're coming here, and you're enraged that they're not still under threat.
Can you say that in addition to the 7 potential white farmers that were murdered, the 18,982,000 black folks that were murdered in the country, that's a problem too?
Yes, all violence is a problem.
Yes, and maybe perhaps
but the government's policies are targeting these particular people with land confiscation, and they're being targeted with violence.
That's incorrect.
There have been no farms taken from any white people yet.
Yeah.
How
but
so?
the laws, do the laws not allow it?
There is a law, but it hasn't been.
There is a law, but they're being targeted.
Kind of like the Constitution.
Hold on, guys. I think that
they're threatening them.
Hold on, a lot is being said right now, including many things that are not true.
What's not true?
So the land. Let's talk about the land for a second.
It's the law.
Scott, just 1 second. Let's talk about the land.
The
land. Hold on a second. Hold on. Let's talk about the land. I'm going to take this one at a time because I think it's really important. 81% of the land, the vast majority, 96% of the private land in South Africa is owned by white people, despite black people being the vast majority of the population, 81%. The president of South Africa pointed this out today, that the United States has eminent domain laws that allows the state to seize land
on the basis
from
of race?
People. Hold on, from people if they want to. And here's what the New York Times writes about what the Trump administration did in its first term. The administration filed more than 110 lawsuits against landowners in Texas as it sought to secure space for the border wall, turning to eminent domain, even though many conservatives view it as an excess of government power that violates the sanctity.
Yeah, so again, what they're trying to do here is false equivalence, whataboutism. Well, what about Trump? It's like, well, yeah, Trump is not trying to take away land based off race, okay? Yes, if the government needs land to secure the border, right, to secure our border, then, hey, that is, I think, a little bit different, right? And I believe those people are compensated when that happens, okay, which is not what is happening in South Africa. That's not what their laws call for. Their laws, again, are based off race, right? They're trying to confiscate land based off race. So, again, it's different, okay? But, again, apparently for these people, you got to wait for the genocide to happen, right, before you can say something about it, right? You got to wait for the mass killings to start happening before you can say something about it, even though, again, there are mass killings that are happening in South Africa, right? And, yes, it is affecting the whole population. I'm just trying to figure out why aren't these people speaking up about all the black people losing their lives, right? Since they love black people so much. They claim they do, but yet they don't really want to speak about what's happening in South Africa when it comes to the black-on-black violence. And the reason for that is the same reason they don't want to talk about the violence that is happening in these liberal cities, right? Because you have black people running the country of South Africa, at least from the government perspective, And it's a complete and total disaster, right? A complete and total disaster, okay? One of the murder capitals of the world. I think that's an issue that if these people were actually, you know, consistent with their ideology, right, they would be concerned about. They would express concern about that, but they only do it in the context of raging about the white South African refugees, right? If it wasn't for this white South African refugee issue, would these people ever talk about all the people being murdered and killed in South Africa? No, they would never talk about it because ultimately today, again, like I try to tell you guys, it doesn't fit the narrative, okay? You've had black folks running this country for the longest time now, and it doesn't really seem to be working out very well, okay? I mean, look at some of the surrounding countries, like Zimbabwe, for example. It seems as if South Africa is headed in that direction, and it's going to be a total disaster, right? That's exactly what's happening, okay, with the government that is running that country. Okay. And I think that's part of the reason why they don't really want to talk about this issue, again, outside of the white farmer refugee issue, right? That's the only time you will ever hear them talk about all of the people being murdered in that country. Again, it's very fascinating how this works, okay? But it's interesting because I read an article about CNN in this show. Apparently, this show is one of CNN's most successful shows, despite the fact that a vast majority of their shows are declining in viewership, but this show is going up in viewership, and it's all because of Scott Jennings, right? They're calling Abby Phillip the superstar of the show, but she's actually not. It's because of Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings is carrying this network on his back, okay? If it wasn't for Scott Jennings, this show would be tanking like all the other CNN shows are tanking. And I just think it's kind of disrespectful of CNN to allow all of these panelists to jump him, to ambush him, right? That was the real ambush. What you guys just witnessed there was the real ambush, okay? I think it's disrespectful for CNN to allow that panel to ambush their superstar, right? The reason why anybody watches their network at all. I think that it is a crime that CNN has not given Scott Jennings his own show, again, considering how he's carrying the network. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.